Imagine entering the grocery store and getting everyday products, fruits, vegetables, meats. You've been wanting to follow a healthy lifestyle, so you get more than the usual amount of leafy green vegetables. When reaching out to grab a head of cabbage, you glance at a bunch of kale and think, I wonder if cabbage or kale is better for me to eat. You say, knowing a yummy bag of potato chips are waiting at home. You pull out your phone to find whether cabbage or kale is more scientifically accurate to discover articles relating to cabbage and kale and health benefits. You discover an article comparing the health benefits of cabbage, spinach, broccoli, and kale for people who want to be heart healthy. These vegetables are given categories or ranked, and each have measured benefits. Hi, my name is Ali, and today we're going to be taking a look at two different types of articles, quantitative and qualitative articles. The type that was just described is a quantitative research article or subject design. These are generally designed to gather data in a numerical form, which is then put into categories or in rank order, or it's measured in units of measurement. So how is this data usually obtained? The data is usually obtained by researchers providing rating scales with definitive answers such as yes or no to categorize the different items examined, like vegetables or fruits. These are just examples. This can relate to any subject that you wish to investigate. So key points to notice within quantitative articles, making it favorable as a study design, may be external factors are controlled to reduce variable results. This basically means you're limiting the amount of outside influence. The end goal of a quantitative article is for objective results. So that means reducing the amount of bias that a researcher may have, the bias within participants of the study, or factors, as well as individuals that are gathering the data for that article. The study design is usually determined before beginning the experiment, so you would have an idea of how the design would go before you even conduct it. We'll see the contrast with qualitative studies and how it relates. The reality of your goal is more objective, so multiple people may see the same result that you do. Whatever you obtain out of the study will be the same. This is going to be in contrast to the qualitative study. Here are some limitations to look for whenever you are in dealing with a quantitative study. There is a lack of real-world settings within quantitative studies, and what that means is basically because you are limiting external factors or values that may interfere with your end results. These studies are typically best done within a confined type of laboratory setting where you may control different aspects. So the issue is you may not be able to relate the study's results to the real world because in the real world, external factors may take effect. So an example with this would be when you provide a questionnaire for someone asking whether they enjoy fruits or vegetables more. That limits their choice of possibility. So having closed-ended questions or just basically providing a limited amount of choices reduces the amount of variability that an individual may have. Perhaps that person likes meats more instead of fruits or vegetables, which is unrelated. However, for the purposes of your study, it makes sense. But in the real-world aspect, it is a little closed-ended. There's a lack of control, or maybe a lack of control. This may include any aspect of the study where unknown or known factors affect conducting of the study. So this would be an example of a participant who is answering questions of a survey at home after a long drive from a long shift on their workday. So they're not going to give the survey their full attention. So the answers you get, they may not be entirely accurate to what that individual believes. Another consideration or limitation you may consider is variable data quantity. So this basically means the studies typically require a greater amount of sample sizes or more participants, typically the people who are involved with the study. So the more people you get, the more generalizable your study is, and the issue is if your study is lacking in participants, then the generalizability and the accuracy of your results may not be great. So comparing a study between 10 participants and 400 participants, if you have a good amount, a good sample of that 400 participants agreeing to one thing or a factor within your study, it'll be much more credible and realistic that it's an actual difference compared to 10 people in the general scheme of things. An example would be you're telling a friend that you and one other individual believe that cabbages are the healthiest vegetable because you and a friend agreed to it, rather than having a whole stadium of different people agreeing to it. Confirmation bias is another aspect to consider when you're looking at quantitative studies. This would mean the researcher misses what may actually be happening in the study and only sees the original research question that's answered. So basically they only see what you want to see, is basically what's entailed there. Expensive and time-consuming aspects may come into play for quantitative studies. The researchers may have a bias to make sure a study's results are favorable to either their own theory, to the journal that they're contributing to make sure it's a positive result and will be published, or it might be in terms of parties that are financially involved. So who's backing the study? Who's providing the input? Are they involved in the study's results in any way, shape, or form? This may affect the results and should be considered. If a research article doesn't have priority power or effect size, and I'll go into this a little bit in another video, if they don't list those two effects with a sizable participant population, so let's say 200 people, and there's no indication of priority power or effect size, then the study might be a lot more difficult to determine if a factor is statistically significant within the study. This goes into the calculation when you're looking at data tables within a quantitative study. The lack of clarity or indirect utilization of p-values. So this is another factor that should be expanded on in another video, talking about, similar to priority power, it looks at how significant there is of a difference there are between two or more certain factors. Incorrectly stating something is statistically significant, or inaccurately documenting the results of data tables. So what that means is basically researchers will tend to take data from a table that may not be statistically significant, it may be clinically significant, which may mean you can use it within a clinical setting and it will make a difference, but statistically, by the numbers, it is not significant. So now that we've seen what quantitative studies are about, how about qualitative studies? According to Punch, qualitative research is data not formed by numbers. Another way to describe qualitative studies may be our interpretive and naturalistic in subject approach. They seek to make sense of or interpret phenomena in terms of the meanings people bring to them. So how is that data gathered? By emphasizing the social reality, groups, and/or culture of individuals and how they feel or live within it. Being conducted in natural settings, these studies are exploratory, answering how or why phenomenon or behaviors exist. So this is in contrast to the quantitative studies where things are determined prior. This is determined after study. Researchers may use a variety of methods to get data, such as unstructured interviews, directly observing, analyzing artifacts, documents, and cultural records, or using personal experience or visual materials. Qualitative studies use open-ended questions, which is in contrast to quantitative in that you may ask a question such as, how do you feel about this factor, this situation? And the individual can't just say one thing or the other. They have to openly and say, I feel so and so about it. Varying analyses may be included, such as content analysis, grounded theory, thematic analysis, or discourse analysis. Qualitative studies will have a smaller sample size than quantitative studies. This is usually because we're looking at how individuals feel about a certain topic, and the data is compiled in thematic content. Usually qualitative studies are without adequate validity or reliability. Qualitative studies are harder to replicate due to subjectivity of responses. You have to also consider the context and other such factors within these type of studies. There's a lengthy time for data collection, which is to be considered. So this may run an issue of, as time moves on, individuals may feel differently about a subject. There's a required expertise of knowledge to analyze the data within qualitative studies. These types of studies are capable of suggesting relationships, causes, effects, and dynamic processes. These are usually displayed in a narrative format, as compared to quantitative studies being more numerical. Limitations for qualitative studies may include, but are not limited to, heavily depending on the researcher's skills in analysis, which gives them a bias. They're not as rigorous of a process as quantitative studies. It's a time-consuming process due to interpretation of the open-ended data analysis. So typically you need at least 2 or 3 individual researchers looking at the same set of data and coming to a consensus as to what is meant by a certain theme or a certain result. The participant response, due to the presence of the researcher, may affect said response. It may be difficult to preserve privacy and confidentiality within the research process for participants that are involved, and finally not using measuring tools that are standardized, as well as not using any form of validity or reliability. So to conclude this video, or to recap what we've discussed, quantitative and qualitative studies are 2 unique forms of research that should both be considered when analyzing a research article. Here is a list of each study design's unique features. The display table comparing quantitative and qualitative types. And finally, here are noted limitations that you should look for that are unique to both quantitative and quantitative studies. I hope this video has been helpful in getting a better understanding of qualitative and quantitative studies. References will be listed in the description below. Thank you.